I think I had the idea, right? Like, wow, I have this license. I have all my ducks in a row. I'm telehealth. I am putting ads out on Yelp and Facebook and Instagram and on Psychology Today. And I just thought that people would just start coming in, right? And I gave myself a year and I was like, wow, no one is really coming. I mean, I did have some like free consultations and things like that, but I realized it does take a lot of work. It takes networking, it takes time, it takes strategy. And now that I'm approaching like a year and a half now, I've realized like, okay, this is what I have to do.
This is Herd Business School, where we sit down with private practice owners and industry experts to learn about the business of therapy together. I'm your host, Michael Fulweiler. This week, I'm joined by Gerald Joseph, also known as the Capital Therapist. He is a licensed social worker, EMDR therapist, and advocate for psychedelic-assisted therapy. In our conversation, we dive into Gerald's journey from fashion to therapy, why authenticity matters, and creating spaces where people can be themselves without fear of judgment, especially folks in the queer community. He's such a light, and I'm excited for you to meet him. Here's my conversation with my friend, Gerald Joseph. Enjoy. Gerald Joseph, welcome to the show.
Hi, Michael. So happy to be here.
Very excited. I've been looking forward to this interview since we really launched this podcast. I'm so grateful for you and for our relationship. We met on Twitter, and you're one of the only people that I've actually met in person and taken that relationship offline.
Wow. No, that's so special.
And one thing I love about you, Gerald, is just the way that you show up authentically. It's really inspiring for me. And I want to start by asking you, is that something that comes naturally for you, or is that something that you've had to work on?
I feel a mixture of both. So I can even like go back to high school, for example. I was definitely like the social kid where I was very out there and outgoing. And then I definitely feel in undergrad where I came out at 18. So just like coming out and just like the discovery of that and of my identity. And I really feel that's when I really blossomed and just like embrace authenticity.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a process. I'd love to talk about like that if you're open to it. You know,
Definitely.
what was that experience like for you, and how was that received?
So like coming out, it was difficult at first. So I came out my freshman year of college, 18, told parents I was getting a piercing and they were just wanting to get more in depth. And it just blossomed into saying, this is who I am. And people suspected even previously, but I can definitely share between having an on-campus LGBT resource center at the time, a good support system. That's what really allowed for me to feel supported and cared for. And then as far as family, they're very loving and supportive right now. But of course, it was difficult at first.
Definitely. And was therapy something that you were doing at the time? Were you exposed to therapy and mental health care at that point as a client?
I was. So that process actually led me into receiving mental health care. So thankfully, the resource center, they were directly connected with the mental health counseling services on campus. And I actually still keep in touch with that therapist to this day from time to time. So it's just like been a beautiful relationship. And I never foresaw myself even becoming a therapist at that time.
Yeah, I want to get into that. But before we get into that, you were actually interested in the fashion industry before social work. And so I know you worked at Urban, you worked at West Elm. So tell me about that and kind of what changed for you and why you decided to move into the mental health industry.
So I was always just attracted towards like visual merchandising and being creative. And in undergrad, I was working retail and I was studying art history and I was creating inspiration boards for Urban Outfitters and just wanting to become a fashion buyer for the brand. So I had interviewed with the company, made it to the final round, and I was really excited about the potential of moving to Philadelphia. and I didn't get the role, and I was completely bummed. I was actually quite hurt because I was like, wow, they really liked me, and I really felt like I connected with the brand and with the people, and just like telling my story and just creating these projects for them. And I moved back home and worked for West Elm, and I was like even interviewing companies in the Atlanta area and New York. And flash forward a couple months later, I actually was dating a social worker. And through dating him, I had these like stereotypes, right? I was like, oh, social workers, they don't make money, or like eating soup, for example. Like, although soup is really good, I like soup,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Sure.
It's a comforting food, but
Right.
just like a lot of stereotypes that I was holding against social work and therapy, and he definitely changed that perspective for me.
Hmm.
And I soon after, I was like wanting to work with children on the spectrum as a behavioral health tech, and I ended up getting into my master's program, and here I am. Yeah.
Here you are. I know it's been a journey. So your master's program was through the University of North Dakota. And when I saw that, my reaction was, you moved to North Dakota? Like, that's such a big change from Florida. But you were explaining it to me, it was an online program, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Was there any kind of in-person component to it, or was it completely virtual?
Yeah. So actually, I have flown out to North Dakota. So the campus was in the city of Grand Forks, which is actually quite beautiful and very beautiful campus. So your first 2 years, you do have to fly out for like a week, and you're fully immersed into the campus and just meeting with your cohort and professors and just engaging in sim labs. So it was a really, really great experience, even way before pandemic. And yeah.
You go get your master's in social work. Was clinical work something that you wanted to do, or were there other aspects of social work, like case management, that you were more interested in?
Yes, great question. I actually feel I like all aspects of social work, and I feel like then just the reason why I chose social work compared to counseling, for example, or even becoming a psychologist is because I just like how versatile the degree is. So I sought case management, I've sought positions in case management, and I just really view working within systems and just treating the whole person and being an advocate. So that leads me to just advocacy, whether it's psychedelic medicine or human rights, you name it.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that. So after do you get your master's in social work, did you work for a hospital, or were you working in community mental health? What did you do after grad school?
Like during grad school, I guess I'll flash back a little bit. So during grad school, I was working for a health insurance company, and working for that health insurer, I was a care coordinator. So that's where I was like doing just like very basic assessments and just making sure members under that health plan were being linked to whether social services or nursing. And then soon after that, I was laid off, and I was in the middle of grad school because my program was 3.5 years. So this may have been my, just say year two, year 1.5, year towards year two. And I was laid off, and it was very sudden, but thankfully I had a partner at the time, and I felt very supported, and I was able to immediately jump ship, and I actually found a role in DC. And it was the first role, Michael, where I was in the community, but I only worked there for 3 days, and I was miserable.
Hmm.
I was miserable because I was like commuting 2 hours and just trying to do balance grad school. And then I quit that job, and I've never quit a job before. And I quit that job, and I received a call about like 2 or 3 days later from quitting that job. And it was for a local health system. And ever since then, I've been connected with that health system. And it's been a blossoming career, like within case management and now as a therapist for that health system.
I know that kind of during this time, you're also wanting to get licensed, right? And like private practice is a goal, but that was a process. I know just, externally seeing that, you took the exam multiple times and like you got so close, but just like didn't pass and then took it again. And just like, again, like you were just right there. What was that experience like for you?
It was a lot. This was like during 2020, the pandemic. and very stressful, right? So working for the health system and facing with patients with COVID and patients are dying and just mentally supporting them while also trying to pass the licensing exam, it was a lot of stress. And there were moments where it was demoralizing and frustrating. And I just found myself wanting to just be vocal and just spreading the news and the word on the experience. It's just basically storytelling. Like, I know I'm a great clinician and a mental health provider, and just that whole experience was, it felt like a huge burden on top of the external, right? And the online community and just my in-person community, and then a lot of advocacy behind, I finally felt once I did pass, like, wow, what a relief.
Definitely. I mean, as someone who knows you and considers you as a friend, like I was rooting for you in the fact that I knew that you were going through this. And like, I know that you're a good therapist, right? And your skills as a clinician are not defined by this test, is antiquated in a lot of ways, right? And so to see like you get so close and not pass, like it made me root for you. And so I think that that speaks to what I mentioned earlier about your authenticity, right? And like, I think this is a great takeaway for folks who are listening, that, you know, when you show up authentically online, like you build relationships and people root for your success. And maybe there's people who don't,
Right. Yeah.
right? And like those aren't your people, and that's okay. I think you have to be secure enough in yourself, right? That if you are putting yourself out there, there's going to be people who don't receive you, and that's okay, right? But I just wanted to recognize that you know, you were so open, and I think what that does is it also gives permission for other people to be open and share their experiences. I imagine there's a lot of folks who had a similar experience, but they didn't talk about it because maybe they were embarrassed by it and they felt really alone in that experience, right? So there's something to be said about community support. And I'm curious now, looking back, what's your perspective on the licensure exam and whether or not we should continue to have that be something that is required? Like, do you think that social workers and mental health professionals should need to pass a licensure exam in order to get licensed, or should their kind of education and, you know, their hours be enough?
I definitely think it should model after, like, for example, like med students, right? I think it should be connected towards once you're in school. That way, information is still fresh and connected. But no, I don't think, whether it's for positions or getting into the work, I don't think that there should be a licensure exam. I think once a person is in grad school and they're actively connected, and in order to get your master's or PhD, you name it, there should be an examination component. However, post grad, I don't believe there should be licensing exams.
Yeah, I think somewhat of a hot take, but I've seen it online, especially like the advice that I've heard with the social work exam, right? Is like, you should answer it in the way that a white therapist would answer it, right? And so it's like, you're not even answering it authentically. You're just trying to like beat the test. Was that advice that you received?
It definitely was, because especially for me as a queer, Black queer clinician, trying to answer certain questions where I personally would not call the police immediately. I would want to build rapport and just develop a plan. And even to this day, I still share that with clients. Like, if I see that they are exhibiting suicidal ideation or the risk is quite acute, we'll talk about it. And I just want to see what is going to be best in their interest. So, like, employing harm reduction perspectives, right? What's going to be best for them to keep them safe while also protecting myself as a clinician. So I see both sides of the coin.
That makes sense. I think the counter argument is, well, there needs to be some type of way to evaluate clinicians, right? Like in the same way that, you know, doctors have their board exams and lawyers take the bar, like, but it sounds like your thinking is that if it's closer to school, like maybe it's part of the grad program versus like you go to graduate school, then you do 3,000 hours, then you take this test like 3 years later.
Right.
You're just in a totally different mindset at that point.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. No, like I definitely think it should be connected towards the program. And then afterwards, you get your hours, you're in supervision, and you're free. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have such a shortage of therapists, right? Like the demand for therapy far exceeds the supply of therapists, yet we make it so difficult in this country to become a therapist, right? So something needs to change there.
Definitely. Yes. No, I even recall being in grad school and most of my program was majority white. And even professionally, there are various therapist events that I walk into, and there's just a handful of melanated minoritized individuals. So I do hope to see a shift where we can even incentivize persons of color to become therapists.
In those spaces, do you feel like you can be your authentic self in the way that you are, say, online or with friends, or do you feel like you need to like tone things down?
Yes, I think it's something that I still battle with myself to this day, right? Because I often share with people like professionalism, it's rooted in white supremacy. And I was even in just full transparency and like even preparing for this podcast, I was like, wow, like what do I want to like wear today? Like
Well, we were texting and I was like, you gotta bring a fit.
yeah,
So,
exactly. So I was like, okay, this like feels cute, right?
yeah.
But I mean, there are certain spaces where, right, where I'm just like, okay. For example, I love crop tops. But I also love like button downs and dresses and skirts. So I'm very fluid with my style and just how I come up. And when I go into certain spaces and professional events, I'm just like, oh wow, are gender nonconforming people, are they included? Like, is there space for expression? So I think that's just like something that I do battle with, especially in a field that has a history of being rigid, right? And it's something that I've challenged. I've challenged even in various systems that I've worked with. In order for me as a clinician to be comfortable, I should be able to express myself and feel comfortable, because how am I going to provide great care along with having clients, patients be their authentic selves and to feel comfortable if I'm not comfortable, right?
Have there been times when people have made comments to you at work about the clothes that you wear, or have you had experiences?
Yes, yes. No, I definitely I've received messaging before where a supervisor had a message, right? And the intent may not have been bad, but the intent, the way it landed for me, it was bad. It was like, Gerald isn't addressed today. And for me, when I received that message, when it was meant to go to a higher leader, I was just like, what is the reason behind this? Like, why are they monitoring me? Right? Why are they monitoring me and why I'm in a dress? Right? I talked it out with them and I even shared with them like how it landed for me. And we were able to have conversation. We were both able to acknowledge like I have done so much work within myself for me to even feel comfortable to express that in both personal and professional capacities.
And if someone feels uncomfortable with the way that you present or show up, that's really a them problem, right?
It is. Yeah.
It's not a you problem. Like, as long
No,
as
not at
you're
all.
not being like disrespectful or whatever, like, but it's really, that's something that they need to work on. And it's not something that you need to change. And I do think that for clients, like, it is important that they see a therapist or they see a clinician who looks like them and they can relate to, right? And if therapists and clinicians are not being their authentic self, then it impacts the way that they show up for their clients and the way that their clients can connect with them. So I do think it is really important.
I agree. Yes. Because my identities are at the forefront and I aim to support my community first. And of course, adjacent communities, right? I'm here for all people. I'm here for the community, especially being like an urban therapist in the nation's capital, given the external the climate, right? Like, I still want to show like we are here fighting. We are here. I'm part of a collective where authenticity and transparency and just saying like, hey, you're safe with me. Like that is so important for me right now.
And this is really important because I've had conversations with therapists who have told me that they feel like it's important for them to be more of a blank slate, that they worry about transference if they self-disclose. And my observation is that therapists with that perspective take more of a psychoanalytical approach, perhaps, kind of maybe more like an old school approach towards how they kind of show up. And if that works for them and the clients that they see, then that's great. But what I'm hearing from you is for the community that you serve and the clients that you work with, like it is important for you to show up as yourself because it makes them feel safe and they are able to put their guard down. Is that accurate?
Very much so. And I actually encourage clients, if they ever have a question, they can always ask me. So if they ever see a post or if they even have a question as far as how I show up in the space, right? They can always ask me. I try to keep that open door, be an open book because it is a relationship, right? And if I see where it's clinically appropriate, I will disclose. And that's just how I was trained to be like an instrument, to be that tool of creating safety, creating inclusion, creating warmth. Yeah.
And it creates an opportunity, right, to build rapport with that client, whether you answer their question or you kind of reflect it back on them and say something like, well, what would it mean to you if I said this? Something like that. And that can create an opportunity to go deeper. So I think it's really important that we don't avoid those questions, or clients don't feel like they can ask their therapist who they voted for, right? Or how they feel about certain issues.
It all has influence. It all has influence, whether it's within the therapist's room, the clinical space, or on both the therapist or the client. So these are important things to keep in mind. And that's why I just aim to just show up authentically, whether it's digitally or out in the community where I've attended protest events. I am very vocal as far as the current administration and the way that things are going. And if clients ever have questions, I just want them to know, this is where I'm at. And if I do notice, for example, if I'm working with someone that is on the more conservative side, I will let them know of my stance and I will gladly refer them out because their safety is going to be important. So I do see this as a dual, like a dual relationship. Well, not a dual relationship, but yeah.
We don't want a dual relationship.
Yeah, we don't want that. Yeah. But
no, I know what you're saying. It's not coming from a place of judgment, right? If someone has different beliefs than you, that's okay. You may not be the right therapist for them, and that's also okay, right? And I think that, so maybe it's there's a dichotomy there, right? Of there's sort of both things are true, and that is okay, which could be at odds with some therapists who believe, well, as a therapist, we should try to help everyone. If someone's reaching out to us, we should, not work with them because they have different beliefs than we do. And so I'm curious your response to that.
I think for me, especially when we think of clinician burnout. So for example, on the public, I love children, right? I love playing with my friends' kids and being supportive for kids. And I do have a history of working with children, but clinically in this age, I do not like working with children, right? So for me as a clinician, I will gladly refer a child out for care and support. So it's the same whether it's politically or even if someone is a homophobe, right? Or just part of an oppressed class, they're just actively engaging in oppression. If I notice where, hey, this is going to affect the therapeutic relationship, I think it's important for clinicians to keep that in mind, right? Where that can impact you. And it's important to create a plan where you can safely transfer that person.
Yeah, that makes sense because it sounds like it's not in the client's best interest to work with you, right? You're not going to be an effective therapist if you can't connect with them. And so it's better for them to work with someone else, right? And you're not just turning them away and saying, sorry, I think that's the important piece here, right? Is yes, I will work with you. Here's a list of referrals. Here's some great other therapists I think that would be a better fit. So
Exactly.
they're still able to get care, but it's just may not be with you, and that's okay.
Right. And that is completely okay. It's 100% okay.
So you get licensed finally.
Yes, finally.
And then
Finally.
we're all celebrating, all excited for you. And then is private practice the next step, and kind of what you had, the next goal that you had for yourself?
It was. Even when I was even going through that licensure process, right? I always had that ideation of private practice. Like I always had that goal. And I guess in a way, I've always been inspired by Oprah, like having multiple streams of revenue. And I've always just wanted to have my own business. So even going back to high school, I took entrepreneurship classes, and I've just always had that mindset of like, okay, this is what I really want to do, and just try to like form my own niche, my own style to practice clinically. And that's why eventually I came up with the Capital Therapist, and just being able to learn and grow. And I'm still learning and growing. It's definitely been a journey. It's been a journey, Michael, but it's been so beautiful. And I'm very happy that I've launched it.
I'm happy too for you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I remember working on a concept for a logo for you. First, I love the name Capital Therapist as a therapist who is in DC. I think it's great. I remember kind of workshopping this logo concept where the Washington Monument was the I in Capital Therapist, but like it looked pretty phallic.
Right. Yes.
Which like maybe that's okay. I don't know, but maybe I don't know. But
right.
So
yeah,
we moved away from that idea, but I was thinking about that the other day and laughing about it.
And then like cherry blossoms and things like that. But yeah, no, I do like the logo, and even how like the current logo, and just how abstract and fun it is.
Being a therapist is about helping people, not crunching numbers. But when you're running your own practice, managing finances can feel like a full-time job, one you never trained for. That's where Herd comes in. Herd is the financial management platform built just for therapists. No more cobbling together spreadsheets, DIY software, or expensive accountants. With Herd, you get bookkeeping, tax support, and financial insights, all in one easy-to-use platform. Herd was started by an accountant and a software engineer who understand the challenges you face as a business owner. Our mission? To make it incredibly easy for therapists to manage their practice as a business, build wealth, and stay focused on what matters most, their clients. Join thousands of therapists who trust Herd with their finances. Schedule a free consultation today at joinherd.com/consult. What has that experience been like for you, going out on your own, trying to get clients in private practice? Has it kind of been more difficult than you expected? Kind of about the same? What has it been like for you?
Yeah, full transparency. It's been hard as fuck. It's been so fucking hard. And the reason why it's been so hard is because I think I had the idea, right? Like, wow, I have this license. I have all my ducks in a row. I'm telehealth. I am putting ads out on Yelp and Facebook and Instagram and on Psychology Today. And I just thought that people would just start coming in, right? And I gave myself a year, and I was like, wow, no one is really coming. I mean, I did have some like free consultations and things like that, but I realized it does take a lot of work. It takes networking, it takes time, it takes strategy. And now that I'm approaching like a year and a half now, I've realized like, okay, this is what I have to do. So first it started, okay, I'm going to start on platforms where it's more accessible. So I advertise on platforms where I can advertise having a sliding scale and truly being able to reach the communities that align with me and my background. So my background is supporting Medicaid, the uninsured, and clientele that may not traditionally afford therapy, right? And I've noticed where these are communities that truly need the support, and I've been able to draw and provide care for them through Sight and Scale. And I've recently gotten paneled, and so it's just been a process, and it's coming, and there are definitely moments where I'm just but it's much better now that I have a grasp on things.
I think it's really important to normalize, right? Because some therapists, they work at a group practice, maybe they're in community mental health, they're building their private practice on the side. They leave, they go into private practice, clients come with them, and within a month or two, they're full. And that's the experience of some therapists, but that's not the experience of all therapists. And I think that it's easy to see posts on social media about therapists talk about, oh, I made 6 figures in my first year, or I filled my caseload in 6 weeks. And it's like, if you see that and that's not what you're experiencing, I think that can be really hard to be like, oh, am I doing something wrong? Am I a bad therapist? Right.
Right.
And
Right.
so,
100%.
for folks who are listening who, are in private practice or going into private practice, and it hasn't been as easy as social media makes it seem, I think it can be validated and hopefully, comforting to know that it can be difficult and it does take time. The thing that I always say about marketing is that it's really an investment, right? Like, it's a long game. I think it's easy to want to take the shortcuts, right? And get like the wins in the short term. But in the long term, I think building that referral network, putting yourself out there, networking, building your reputation, all of those things, like, that's going to keep your practice full. Because sure, you could spend a bunch of money on Google ads or Facebook ads and maybe you'd get clients that way. But as soon as you stop running those ads, now where are those clients coming from, right? And so I think you're doing all the right things. And I know we've talked about it too, and like your website and profiles and all of that. And I think a part of it too is experimentation. You set your fee, and if it's too high, you can lower it. Or I'm going to try private pay. I'm struggling to get clients because clients really are wanting to use their insurance. So I'll get paneled and I'll take insurance. And maybe in the future, I'll come off of insurance, but it's okay, in the short term to do those things. And so I think there's no like one right way. I think something we also talked about too is the importance of owning your own website, right? And like even just having like a Squarespace site, because that is I describe it, it's your real estate on the internet, right? Like
It is, yeah.
It's your 24/7 employee. It's always on. So just like those kinds of things, I think, can make a big difference.
Truly. And I've had even just opportunities, right? Whether it's professional development or even just ways to even tap into other databases for clientele. They reach out to me through my website. So I have definitely seen the benefits of, as you just shared, owning your own website and just having your domain and well laid out website. It has been phenomenal.
You also have a specialization in psychedelic-assisted therapy, which I'm fascinated by. I remember the last time I was in DC, we got drinks and we talked about it. And as we were talking, I remember thinking, and I don't know if I said this or not, but I remember thinking like, I wish this conversation was being recorded, because
Yeah.
this is like so fascinating, something that I want to share and for people to learn. And so I'd love to chat about it if you're open to it. Maybe we could start by your first experience or exposure to psychedelic assisted therapy. Was it something that you experienced personally, or is it something that you learned about in a more professional context in terms of a therapeutic, intervention?
Yes. So I can definitely share my own experiences with psychedelics. Started just recreational use. So just imagine it's just college kids wanting to have fun and getting a grab of mushrooms and just tripping out. So I just remember a couple times like being in college and just securing a bag of mushrooms and being surrounded by a group of friends. And we went on experiences. And like one profound experience I don't mind sharing, it involved 2 friends of mine. So one friend had recently come out to their family, and then another friend was actively grieving the loss of their sibling. And then for me, so this was my sophomore year of college, and I was still processing the after effects as far as coming out, right? And just that long-term process of coming out. Because I always share with people, we're always coming out, especially if you're part of the LGBTQ plus community, you're always coming out. So it's not just like one and done. You walk into spaces and you're always coming out. So yeah, like this journey that my friends and I, we went on, it was just very profound and beautiful. And we were just all supportive of one another. And it still just touches me in so many ways. And soon after that experience, I actually had stopped using psychedelics for a while. And it wasn't until the pandemic I was seeing information of psychedelics being used in a therapeutic context, professionally and in clinical spaces and research. And it just caught my eye, especially with so much suffering, and I had my own personal experience with psychedelics. And I was just like, hey, let me look more into this. So I actually ended up bringing it up during clinical supervision. And I felt so supported by my supervisor at the time and just by my peers being able to share my own experiences, because there's so much stigma, and there's still stigma. And I still experience it as a clinician, where due to the war on drugs, where psychedelics are seen as taboo. And there just needs to be education about them. These are important tools. They're powerful tools, but they're important. And they do have a place when it comes to healing and providing support, or even just recreational use.
They're like somewhat new in Western therapy, but in like Eastern medicine, my understanding is, psychedelics, this goes back thousands of years, right? Like this isn't something that that's new. Like there's a lot of history here. So I'm curious, how then did you kind of approach integrating psychedelic assisted therapy into your clinical practice? Because I know that you completed a program through the Integrative Psychiatry Institute.
Yes, in Boulder, Colorado, which was a phenomenal experience and training. So it's a year-long program. So studied various psychedelic compounds and interactions with classical pharmacology drugs and how to apply psychedelics in various contexts. So legally, ketamine is used. And within the psychedelic community, individuals view ketamine strictly medical, non-psychedelic, but that's up for debate. I personally do view ketamine as a psychedelic, just like various strains of cannabis can actually be psychedelic. Legally, and in a therapeutic context, I work with a physician, and we provide ketamine in a therapeutic context. So, and then in DC, psychedelics are decriminalized. And there's a local store where I've provided education and support to the community, as well as my contact information, where I do employ harm reduction techniques, where I could prepare individuals for psychedelic experiences. So if they do procure mushrooms or other substances on the street, utilizing harm reduction principles to keep them safe. And then we will process afterwards. So we'll integrate their experience and making sure that they're safe. And that's like the one thing that I learned during my training. You don't want to make any sudden moves. So let's say during a psychedelic experience, having a notion, I need to move to California. You don't want to make any sudden moves.
Right. Yeah.
So just like being able to process, right? Process the experience, process the feelings, the thoughts associated with that experience, and keeping people safe.
What are some of the risks of psychedelic assisted therapy and clients having psychedelic experiences?
I can say in a therapeutic context. So as far as psychedelic assisted therapy, it's always either in a medicalized environment. So keeping individuals safe, and you do have to be assessed by psychiatrists. So a psychiatrist is going to try and minimize as much risk as possible. However, with ketamine, it's a dissociative. So some of the risks can be dissociation, right? People may not feel like as if they're in their body. And then ketamine abuse can also lead to like renal issues and just additional complications physically. So that's why it's really important to have a psychiatrist, to have medical professionals on standby for support when it comes to dosage and working with clients. Now, I can say on the streets, right? So, in a community context, whether it's like substances like MDMA, LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, various psychedelic classes, if a person has a history or a family history of, like, say, schizophrenia or psychosis, right? There can be an increased likelihood of having like a psychotic episode. So that's why it's really important to understand. And then also, I love that there's more and more resources being created. So, for example, there's the Fireside Project where individuals can contact 24/7 a hotline and get support. So, let's say someone is at a festival or they're with their friends, they can contact this hotline 24/7 for support. So, that's what I fully believe in both contexts, whether it's recreational or in therapeutic infrastructures being built and created for safety.
The family history piece is super important. I know I've shared this with you. I have a family history of schizophrenia, so that's, made me hesitant to use psychedelics, right? Or even kind of experiment or explore, because I don't know what that experience is going to be like for me. And so I think that one, just, doing that assessment, but also just assessing comfort level. Cause I imagine so much of your experience is influenced by your state of mind and how you're feeling. And if you're going through this experience feeling like super anxious, then that could lead
Yes.
to, a bad experience. And is it common for clients to have like a bad experience using
Uh-huh.
psychedelics?
Uh-huh.
Is that something that, you, not obviously like talking about specific clients, but,
Right.
is that
Yeah.
something that you talk about kind of in the training and program of like, this may happen and kind of what to do?
The language, it's called the container. So we always want to make sure the container is safe. So the container is the space. So that is the space where the work is happening. So certain therapists, they'll create like almost like a ceremony where there can be like an altar, right? And there's candles and there's flowers, and the client will bring an intention. So they'll bring like what they intend to do with the work, with the medicine, and they may bring photographs or things that are important for them, things that are grounding. In various spaces, there may be yoga mats, and just trying to make the space as comfortable as possible. But I've also been in the more medicalized environment where you do have like a couch or you have like a recliner, and there's like heart monitors and just various instruments for safety. Some clinics may have cameras for safety. Supportive touch is also encouraged, but you always want to gain consent. That's of critical, obtaining consent from the client. But yes, I always love to just like ground individuals and just be intentional before getting into the work.
What kinds of things is psychedelic assisted therapy helpful for treating? Like, are there certain kind of presenting concerns or certain types of, challenges that clients face where psychedelic assisted therapy can be helpful?
Yes, yes. Psychedelic assisted therapy can be helpful to treat, for example, PTSD. The Veterans Affairs has engaged in extensive research with the use of MDMA to treat PTSD. So psychedelics can be used for PTSD. It can be used for treatment-resistant depression, various mood disorders, anxiety. There's research coming out of Hopkins regarding eating disorders and psychedelic use and body dysmorphia. Historically, going back to the 80s, psychedelics were even used in couples therapy. So MDMA, they call MDMA the love drug
Right.
because
Yeah.
it's an
I remember
empathogen.
hearing about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So couples that are experiencing hardship, right? They actually fall in love again, depending on the space and just with the medicine. So I've heard all sorts of stories from clinicians working with couples and MDMA use. So yeah, psychedelics can treat various conditions. It's just really important, the assessment piece and the actual space piece.
For folks who are listening who are interested in learning more about psychedelic assisted therapy and getting maybe kind of an introductory training, is there a book or a program or an organization that you would recommend, at least as just a starting point?
Definitely, yeah. So one organization that's in the forefront of my mind is a community organization based in the San Francisco Bay Area, where they aim to make training affordable, and that's Alchemy. So I highly recommend Alchemy as far as therapists getting trained and affordable. I also recommend IPI. There's the CIIS, California Institute Integrated Studies. They're considered the Harvard of psychedelic training, very competitive though. As far as literature, I recommend reading the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide by Dr. James Fadiman. He is a psychologist, studied out of Stanford, and grew up during the height of the 60s in counterculture and studied various psychedelics and created his own microdose protocol that I frequently recommend and advise as far as safe use. Michael Pollan. So Michael Pollan, How to Change Your Mind. So as a journalist, he's done his own research and engaged in his own use of psychedelics. So there's a lot of information out there. There's maps as far as a professional organization. Yeah, so definitely recommend.
I was thinking of Michael Pollan. I remember reading his book Omnivore's Dilemma, which is about kind of the food system in this country and just being like really blown away by it. It really kind of questions how you think about food and how it's produced in the United States. But I know kind of more recently, he's also kind of become more interested in psychedelics, and he's become a speaker and an advocate. And so definitely recommend his work. You also practice EMDR. And so is EMDR associated with psychedelic assisted therapy and integrated, or is it just a separate modality in terms of your practice?
Very new. However, I do view it quite important as part of stabilization. So with like PTSD, right? So whether it's with the preparation phase, right? So just preparing, so just creating a state for support that people can always refer to. So like, let's say someone is a 10, right? Be able to lower that level of disturbance, whatever it is that an individual wants to focus on before they actively do their own work or they work with a physician under a psychedelic state, and myself, that's important. And then of course the reprocessing after that experience. So lots of development as far as EMDR or various therapies in psychedelics, but I think it's quite promising. I think therapists can use various interventions, whether it's being psychodynamic or gestalt or relational psychoanalysis. I think it's going to be quite interesting where this goes in the next 10 years.
Definitely, as someone who is not a therapist but works with therapists, I am excited about the approaches that are, being developed, whether it's psychedelic assisted therapy, EMDR, the use of kind of AI and artificial intelligence and artificial reality as well. There's some pretty amazing things being done kind of with like virtual reality and kind of working with kids on the autism spectrum. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see kind of how the field continues to change and evolve over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yes, yes. And scientists, researchers are creating psychedelics for it doesn't even involve the compounds for the visual effects. So it's just reducing. So it is going to be very interesting where the science goes.
And hopefully conversations like this continue to normalize the use of psychedelic assisted therapy. I know that it's something that still is very stigmatized. And so I think it's important that you're talking about it. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation. We're coming towards the end, unfortunately. And we like to wrap up these conversations with a few rapid fire questions. So these are some fun ones. All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
What's your favorite item in your closet right now?
Ooh, that's a really tough one. Okay, my favorite item in my closet right now, hoodies, because we're kind of in that time of the year where it's like still kind of cool, but it's also warm. So mixed weather. So yeah, I like a good hoodie.
Same. Love a cozy hoodie.
Yeah.
Sex and the City character you most identify with?
I feel if you asked me 2 years ago, I definitely would have been Carrie. I still feel I have my Carrie moments, but I feel I'm more like Charlotte. I do feel more of a Charlotte right now.
Love that. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, no, I feel like I'm Charlotte in the way where very intentional as far as navigating the DC dating scene. I'm just like more business, but then also like fun. And I like that about Charlotte. She like means like business. She can be a little out there as far as like maybe a little spacey, but she's also very fun. And I love that about her.
Such a timeless show. My
It
wife and I
is.
will put it on when we don't have anything else to watch, and it's always so good. Biggest misconception that people have about psychedelic assisted therapy?
That it is the end all be all. Like people think that psychedelics are going to just transform my life and just like various medicines, right? So for example, if someone is a diabetic and they're taking certain medicine, that medicine may not work for them. So I think we have to use caution as far as saying, okay, this medicine can treat everything. And that may not be the case.
One thing you want therapists to take away from this conversation?
Have fun. Have fun, be yourself. I think it's so important, especially in today's climate. It's very heavy. The external is so heavy, and we have to find ways to restore ourselves, rejuvenate ourselves, and feel connected with ourselves. Yeah. So we can be the best for our client.
You are the embodiment of that. And
thank you. Oh, good. Because like life is short, right? Life is short. And I appreciate you sharing that because I do want to like embody being fun and authentic. And despite the pressure of the external, and going back to what I mentioned with being a therapist, right? It's hard. So we have to have fun.
Absolutely, Gerald. Thank you so much for coming on the show. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on the show is I think that more people need to know about you and know who you are. I think that you're such a light. And so go follow Gerald on social media. Where can folks connect with you?
Yes, people can connect with me on The Capital Therapist. So I am on Instagram, The Capital Therapist. Look me up. I'm also on LinkedIn. So you can just look up my name, Gerald Joseph, or follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky. I also use my names on Gerald Joseph on those sites as well. So yes, please connect everyone. And thank you, Michael, for this opportunity. It's been great.
Yeah, definitely recommend follow Gerald. See some great outfits, some great dancing videos, always
Yes.
just really great vibes and energy.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you so much, Gerald.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Herd Business School, brought to you by Herd, the financial management platform for therapists. To get the class notes for this week's episode, go to joinherd.com/podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll see you in the next class.